Year 4. Look at how long my fringe has gotten. I've got quite a bad hay fever, so if I start sneezing violently during this, it's not part of the story. So just me. So, before the bank holiday weekend, remember the Giants told the BFG and Sophie, who was hiding in his pocket, that they were going off to eat some English school children at a boggle house for boys and a giggle house for girls. So, from a boys' and a girls' school. And Sophie was really upset by the whole thing, as you would be. And the next chapter is called The Great Plan. "We've absolutely got to stop them," Sophie cried. "Put me back in your pocket, quick, and we'll chase after them and warn everyone in England that they're coming." "Redonkulous and impossible," the BFG said. "They is going 2 times as fast as me. They is finishing their guzzle before we is even halfway." "But we can't just sit here and do nothing," Sophie cried. "How many boys and girls will they eat?" "Oh, many," the BFG said. "The flesh lump-eating giant alone has the most squackling wopsy appetite." "Will he snatch them out of the beds while they're sleeping? Like peas out of a pottle," the BFG said. "I can't bear to think of it," Sophie cried. "Then don't," said the BFG. "For years and years I is sitting here on this very rock night after night while they is galloping away. I is feeling so sad for all the human beings they is going to gobble up, but I has gotten used to it, and there's nothing I can do. If I wasn't a titchy little runty giant and only 24 feet high, I would be stopping them. But it is absolutely out of the window." "Do you always know where they're going?" Sophie asked. "Always," the BFG said. "Every night they is yelling at me as they go bootling past. The other day they was yelling, 'We is off to Mississippi and Missouri to guzzle them both.' Disgusting," Sophie said. "I hate them." She and the BFG sat quietly side by side on the blue rock in the gathering dusk. Sophie had never felt so helpless in her entire life. After a while, she stood up and cried out, "I can't stand it. Just think of those poor little boys and girls who are going to be eaten alive in a few hours' time. We can't sit here and do nothing. We've got to go after those brutes." "No," the BFG said. "We must," Sophie said. "Why won't you go?" The BFG sighed and shook his head firmly. "I has told you 5 or 6 times," he said, "and the third will be the last. I is never shown myself to human beings." "Why ever not? If I do, they will be putting me in the zoo with the jiggly raffs and the caterpillars." "Nonsense," Sophie said. "And they will be sending you straight back to the Norphanage," the BFG said. "Human beings is not famous for their kindness. Grown-up human beings. They is all squiffle rotters and grink sludgers." "Simply isn't true," Sophie said. "Some of them are very kind indeed." "Who?" the BFG said. "Name one." "The Queen of England," Sophie said. "You can't call her a squiffle rotter or a grink sludger." "Well," the BFG said. "And you can't call her a squeak pit or a nut muncher either," Sophie said, getting angrier and angrier. "The flesh lump eater is longing very dearly to guzzle her up," the BFG said, smiling a little now. "Who, the Queen?" Sophie cried, aghast. "Yeah," the BFG answered. "Flesh lump eater says he has never eaten a queen and thinks that perhaps she is having an especially scrumdiddlyumptious flavour." "How dare he?" Sophie cried. "But Flesh lump eater says that there is too many soldiers around her palace and he dursn't try it." "He'd better not," Sophie said. "He is also saying that he would very much like to guzzle one of the soldiers in the pretty red suit, but he is afraid that their big furry hats that they is wearing might be sticking in his throat." "I hope he chokes," Sophie said. "Flesh lump eater is a very careful giant," the BFG said. Sophie was silent for a few moments, and then suddenly, in a voice filled with excitement, she cried out, "I've got it! I think I've got it, by golly!" "Got what?" asked the BFG. "The answer," Sophie said. "We'll go to the Queen. It's a terrific idea. If I went and I told the Queen about these disgusting man-eating giants, I'm sure she would do something about it." The BFG looked down at her sadly and shook his head. "Never in a month of Mondays. She is never believing you." "I think she would." "Never," the BFG said. "It has sounded such a wonky tall story. The Queen will be laughing and saying, 'What awful rub squatch!'" "She would not." "Of course she would," the BFG said. I've told you before, human beings simply is not believing in giants. Let's find a way of making her believe them, Sophie said. And how is you getting in to see the Queen anyway? The BFG asked. Now, hold on a second, Sophie said. Just hold on, because I've got another idea. Your ideas is full of crodswoggle, the BFG said. Not this one, Sophie said. You say if we tell the Queen she'd never believe us. I assert she would not, the BFG said. But we aren't going to tell her, Sophie said excitedly. We don't have to tell her. We'll make her dream it. That is an even more froth-bungling suggestion, the BFG said. Dreams is lots of fun, but nobody is believing in dreams either. You was only believing in a dream while you was actually dreaming it. But as soon as you was waking up, and you was saying, oh, thank goodness, it is only a dream. Don't you worry about that part of it, Sophie said. I can fix that. Never can you fix it, the BFG said. I can, I swear I can. But first of all, let me ask you a very important question. Here it is. Can you make a person dream absolutely anything in the world? Anything you like, the BFG said proudly. If I said I wanted to dream that I was flying in a bathtub with silver wings, could you make me dream it? I could, the BFG said. But how, Sophie said. You obviously don't have exactly that dream in your collection. I do not, the BFG said. I would be mixing it up. How could you mix it up? Sophie said. It's a bit like mixing a cake. If you was putting the right amounts of all the different things into it, you was making a cake come out any way you want. Sugary, splongy, currany, Christmassy, grobswitchy. It's the same with dreams. Go on, Sophie said. I has dillions of dreams on my shelf, right or left? Right, Sophie said. Well, I has dreams about bathtubs, lots of them. I has dreams about silver wings, and I has dreams about flying. So all I has to do is mix the dreams together in a proper way, and very quickly I is making a dream where you is flying in a bathtub with silver wings. I see what you mean, Sophie said. I didn't know you could mix one dream with another. Oh, dreams like being mixed, the BFG answered. I was getting very lonesome all by themselves in those glassy bottles. Right, Sophie said. Now then, do you have dreams about the Queen of England? Oh, lots of them, the BFG said. And about giants? Oh, of course, the BFG said. And about the giants eating people? Swiggles of 'em, the BFG said. And what about little girls like me? Those is the commonest of all, the BFG said. I has bottles and bottles of dreams about little girls. And you could mix them up just as I want you to? Sophie asked, getting more and more excited. Of course, the BFG said. But how is this helping us? I think you is barking up the wrong dog. Now hold on, Sophie said. Listen carefully. I want you to mix a dream which you will blow into the Queen's bedroom while she is asleep. And this is how it shall go. Now hang on a minute, Tick, the BFG said. How is I going to get near enough to the Queen of England's bedroom to blow my dream? You was talking dumb silly. I'll tell you that later, Sophie said. For a moment, please just listen carefully. Here is the dream I want you to mix. Are you paying attention? Very close, the BFG said. I want the Queen to dream about that 9 disgusting giants, each about 50 feet tall, are galloping off to England in the night. She must dream their names as well. What are their names again? Flesh lump eater, the BFG said. Man hunger, bone cruncher, child chewer, meat dripper, gizzard gulper, maid masher, blood bottler, and butcher boy. Let her dream those names, Sophie said. And let her dream that they will be creeping into England in the depths of the witching hour and snatching little boys and girls from their beds. And let her dream say that they will be reaching into the bedroom windows and pulling the little boys and girls out of their beds. And then, Sophie paused. Do they eat them on the spot or carry them away first? She asked. They is usually popping them straight into their mouths like popcorn, the BFG said. Put that in the dream, Sophie said. And then they'll dream. The dream must say that when their tummies are full, they will go galloping back to giant country where no one can find them. Is that all? The BFG said. Certainly not, Sophie said. Then you must explain to the Queen in her dream that there's a big friendly giant who can tell her where the beasts are living, so she can send her soldiers and her armies to capture them once and for all. And then let her dream one very important thing. Let her dream that there is a little girl called Sophie sitting on her windowsill who will tell her where the big friendly giant is hiding. Where's he hiding? Asked the BFG. We'll come to that later, Sophie said. So the Queen dreams her dream, right? Right, the BFG said. Then she wakes up, and the first thing she thinks is, what a horrid dream! I'm so glad it was only a dream. And then she looks up from her pillow, and what does she see? What does she see? The BFG asked. She sees a little girl called Sophie sitting on her windowsill, right there in real life before her very eyes. How is you going to be sitting on the Queen's windowsill, may I beg? You are going to put me there, Sophie said, and that's the lovely part about it. If someone dreams there's a little girl sitting on her windowsill, and then she wakes up and sees the little girl really sitting there, that is a dream come true, is it not? I is beginning to see where you is driving to, the BFG said. If the Queen is knowing that part of her dream is true, then perhaps she is believing the rest as well. That's about it, Sophie said, but I shall convince her of that myself. And you said you was wanting the dream to say where the big friendly giant is also going to be talking to the Queen? Absolutely, Sophie said, you must. You're the only one who can tell her where to find the other giants. How is I meeting the Queen? The BFG asked. I is not wanting to be shooted at by her soldiers. The soldiers are only at the front of the palace, Sophie said. At the back there's a huge garden. There are no soldiers there at all. There's a very high wall with spikes around the garden to stop people climbing in. But you could simply walk over that. How is you knowing all this about the Queen's palace? The BFG asked. Last year, I was in a different orphanage, Sophie said. It was in London. We used to go for walks round there. Is you helping me find the palace? The BFG said. I has never dared go sneaking and hiding around London in my whole life. I'll show you the way, Sophie said confidently. I is very frightened of London, the BFG said. Don't be, Sophie said. It's full of tiny dark streets, and there are very few people about in the witching hour. The BFG picked Sophie up between one finger and his thumb, and placed her gently in the palm of his hand. Is the Queen's palace very big? He asked. It's huge, Sophie cried. How is we finding the right bedroom? Well, that's up to you, Sophie said. You're supposed to be the expert in this sort of thing. And you is absolutely sure that the Queen will not be putting me in the zoo with the caterpillars? Of course you won't, Sophie said. You'll be a hero, and you'll never have to eat snozzcumbers again. Sophie saw the BFG's eyes widen. He licked his lips. You mean it? He said. You really mean it? No more disgustive snozzcumbers? I mean, you could get one if you wanted to. Or you couldn't get one if you wanted to, Sophie said, because human beings don't grow them. That did it. The BFG got to his feet. When is you want me to mix this special dream? He asked. Now, Sophie said. At once. When are we going to see the Queen? He said. Tonight, Sophie said, as soon as you've mixed the dream. Tonight? Cried the BFG. What a flush-bunkling flurry! Well, if we can't save tonight's children, we can save tomorrow's, Sophie said. And what's more, I'm getting famished. I haven't had a thing to eat in 24 hours. Well, we better get crackling, the BFG said, moving back towards the cave. Sophie kissed him on the top of his thumb. I knew you'd do it, she said. Come on, let's hurry.